All right, everyone. Thank you for coming today. So I do speak quickly. Sorry, it's just what I do. If you've seen any of my videos, you already know that. But this is going to be recorded, and it's going to be put up online. So if you miss something, don't worry about it. So we're talking about landscapes in Lightroom and Photoshop. So the first question that I always get, well, most of the time, is, should I use Lightroom or should I use Photoshop? So I'm just going to go quickly through a few slides. So this is what I do in Lightroom, right? So we can do things like lens correction, right? We can apply color profiles, which apply like a look and a feel like we used to when we used to choose from different films, right? And they can be realistic or they can be unrealistic. They can be very creative. I do things like noise reduction. So here's the original, right? And then here it is with the reduced noise. We can do things like reflection removal. Did you know that? That is a new thing as of today. So here it is before, right? Shooting through, this might not be a landscape, but it's at the zoo. But look at the before and after. Well, I know, I cannot believe this. All right, you guys are gonna be a good crowd. Okay, what else can we do? We can do things like people removal. I love this because I don't really like people. What else can we do? We can remove unwanted distractions like people's footprints. Why? If you go to a muddy place like this, do not step on it, right? Then sometimes there's just distractions, right? So we can do all this with the remove tool. You can use generative AI or you can choose not to. That's up to you. You can change the whole mood of something. But my point here is with how easy it is to remove things today. Don't miss that shot just because there's something in it, because you will be able to remove that. All right, so other distractions, right? There they go. We can crop, we can straighten our images, we can transform them. So with wide angles, we can go ahead and straighten those trees. We can edit the tonality of our images and bring out with color. We can add contrast to our images. All of these things, we can correct our colors, right? Or we can do creative color adjustments like this. Just depends on what you want to do. You can even do color grading. So this is all in Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, whichever one you prefer to use. You know, we can take things to black and white. We can do our vignette effects. We can even add lens blur after the fact. So if we want to get like that kind of tiny look, like it's a little model buildings, we can do that. We can add texture and clarity to really make things punch. We can use dehaze. It's not just for skies, right? Try it with anything where you want to kind of get rid of any haze or that atmospheric perspective, or you can do the opposite and add it. It's up to you. And then when it gets really fun, this is when we do our selective adjustments, right? So we can go ahead and bring out detail. We can work in HDR. We can make AI selections like selecting the sky, selecting the objects. We can actually paint with light in there, right? So there's a brush, so just depending on how detailed you are and how much time you want to spend, you can really clean things up. I mean, there's before. The thing is, when I photograph this, I'm already seeing what it is I can do because I know all the things that we can do in Lightroom. So again, this is all with Lightroom. There's this new landscape massing that is absolutely insane. And selecting objects just became so much easier. There's really, it is endless possibilities in Lightroom. But there are still reasons to go to Photoshop. And what are those? So I would say in Photoshop, if my image looks like this and I want it to look like that, I'm going to go and do that in Photoshop, right? So there's the raw file, and there it is in Photoshop. Just because the number of little spots I would have to put down would be a lot. And for me, with a tablet, it's much easier for me just to clone something out. Same with something like this. It doesn't actually look like it would be that hard, but there are so many subtle gradations in that snow that I would take this one and do it in Photoshop. Same with this. And I know some of you are thinking like, she's crazy. I know. It's okay. I like doing this, like Friday night, glass of wine. I will do these types of things, right? Large unwanted distractions. Again, don't miss the image. I mean, this image is all about the ice, not that mountain, right? So we just take it out. You can take it out later. I'm not a photojournalist, so it doesn't bother me. We can have that conversation later if you want to. You know, I can't move that frog. Those things have little spines on them, right? So I'm just going to fill it in so that we are looking at the frog and not the background. All these things are in Photoshop, right? I love this. They look like little aliens out there. So what do? Take the photo. You can remove things later. This one I wanted to add some text because I wanted it for the cover of a book, so just removed all that stuff. Because the thing is, when we're looking at something, like an iceberg or like the polar bear, we're not looking at all that other garbage, right? Like our eyes can't see like the computer and you at the same time. We look back and forth. So if there's a distracting element, I certainly want to get the image, and I can just remove that. Like, for me, the thing on the right, see, I just had to move that. See, much better, right? Look at the clouds. They're too crowded up there. Much better, much better. Okay, here's another one. Just, I love these landform formations. And then compositing. So I don't know how you feel about this. If you don't agree with me, that's okay. But here's the thing with compositing. Like, I'm fine taking out that ice, but I don't want to take out the ice in the background. So what do? Well, I'm in the same location with the same direction of light, the same quality of light. I tilt my camera up and I go, here's a nice clean sky. And then you can just bring the sky down a little bit. Because I wasn't looking at all that garbage back there. I was looking at the iceberg, and that's what I want other people to see, so hopefully they feel the same way that I do when I was there. Same with this. I'm on a boat. I can't get down any lower, so I can't get rid of the background, photograph the sky, put them together. Again, it's so messy. Anybody want to retouch that for me? No. What did I do? I walked like 20 yards. 20 yards away, there was no ice. Same direction of light, same quality of light. So easy to composite this way. Didn't like the mountains in the background, went back the next day. Very different lighting, but hey, that worked for me. Use the pen tool, go right along the top, right, and combine them. For me, I like it, it's simplicity. Sometimes the skies just aren't there. So when you do see a good sky, photograph it. Put it in your little image bank. It is so easy now to replace skies in Photoshop. So here's a beautiful sky, we can replace it. There's actually a trick to doing that one, so I'll show you that one in a little bit. And then selections. Again, you can see, even with the depth of field, I can't knock out the background enough. So what do? Use the pen tool or any other selection, put in a little blue gradient, and I've got what I want. And then the last thing that I use Photoshop for, sometimes it's just easier to make selections, right? So, oh, and then I do weird composites, stuff like that. Okay, so that's it with Keynote. Let's get into how I actually do all of this. So we'll start in Lightroom Classic. Sorry, I gotta take off my glasses, because otherwise I can't see. We'll start with this image right here, and we are just gonna go through as many of these as we can really quickly and then go over to Photoshop. So I'm gonna go to the Develop module, just tap the D key, that gets you to the Develop module. And then what am I gonna do? So if you need to denoise your image, you can now do that right over here under Detail, and you can denoise in the same file. So in previous versions, before today, you had to actually export an image and denoise it. If you're going to use denoise, you want to do that first. Why? Because if you do everything else, like think about it, if you're doing any cloning or healing or retouching, and then you change the amount of noise in the image, all of that will need to be recalculated. So it's not that you can't do it, but it's going to save you time if you denoise your image first. Need a little sip. This was what I had. It's bubbly. I should know better. You know what happens when you drink bubbly things. Okay, so first thing I would do is denoise. The second thing I shouldn't say that. Okay, the first thing I do, because I'm using Lightroom Classic, is I have set up my raw defaults. So if I go into my preferences here, you will notice under presets that I've got my raw defaults for these two cameras, which are the two bodies I'm using right now, set so that every time I import a file, not only does it remove any lens, it corrects the lens, so it removes the distortion from the lens as well as the chromatic aberration, and it applies Adobe Landscape as my default profile so that I don't have to do that, because I do rarely shoot photographs of people. So that's already done for me. So by the time I've imported, I've already got those two things applied. If you want, there's a video. I'll put up a QR code at the end where you can see the video. I don't want to go through it right now in detail, but basically just know that those things are always applied on import because I've set that up. So then I would go ahead and do my denoise. We can use the slider right here to do more or less denoise. And then I would go ahead and crop my image, right? Because there's kind of this weird area over here, and I don't really like it, so tap the R key, R key for crop. I know. You can crop. It's great. So we'll just crop that down a little. I think that's a little bit more interesting. Maybe a little bit, no, see, I don't want that mountain to go down further, so let's just do that because I don't want to crop off the light and I want to keep it the same aspect ratio, so I'll just tap return. Fine. Now, if we look at my histogram, this is exposed properly, right? I haven't blown anything out, so there's no pure whites here, but there just isn't the dynamic range. So I want to work on that a little bit. The first thing I'll do is I'll go over here to my basic panel, and I'm going to start moving my whites, right? So you hold down your Option key, and you start dragging over. And what that does is it kind of like thresholds your screen so that when you start pushing something to pure white, it will turn white. So I just want to make sure that I push my white slider over to the right to set my white point, but I don't want to go so far that I actually see that pure white. So I'll back off a little there. So now my whites are set to be as bright as they can, but still have detail when I print. And then we can do things like set our black point. We can either do it here or we can do it with dehaze. I'm going to do it with a black slider because if I use dehaze, it's going to add a little bit too much color to this one. And you can go as far as you want here. You know, some people do push their images to pure black. That's up to you. That's an aesthetic choice. I'm going to go ahead and keep some detail in there. In fact, I might go in and increase my shadows just a little bit, maybe take down my highlights so that I get a little bit more in the mountains there. Okay, so that looks decent. When I'm doing that, I now realize that I've got some spots right down here, so we can tap Q. That will give me my little, what's it called? Remove tool? Yeah, remove tool. So then we can just use our right bracket or left bracket to get those larger or smaller, and I can choose whether or not I want to use generative AI, right? If you don't want to, then just don't pick this tool and don't use generative AI. You can just use your heal tool, and then you can just come right down here and paint. There we go. And maybe put one little spot there, and maybe get a little bit smaller of a brush here. It looks like I missed a little spot right over here. So we'll just click again, and then we can come right down here. Okay, how's that looking? That looks better. Oh, no, it doesn't. It copied that one over from here, so I'm going to tap the H key. So I just had that hidden, and I'm like, no, I don't want that there. I'm just going to move that right over here. Or we could just hit refresh, and it will just continuously pick different spots for us. So whichever way you want to do it. Okay, so now all of those things have been removed. That is terrific. We've made our global adjustments. So now I want to go in, and I want to make some local adjustments. But here's the thing. Some of the local adjustments use AI. There's AI masking, right? Like select subject, select object. So I have gotten in the habit of doing all of my remove before I do my masking so that it doesn't have to re-render it. So what do I want to do? I want to add like this nice warmth to this valley area. So I'll click, well, before I do that, because I want to use generative AI, you guys might not want to do this, but I do. These mountains really bug me. Like, look at, they're terrible. Oh, look at those. It's all this like, ugh. All right, so too messy, way too messy. So I go here, and I'm going to use generative, not on that one. I'm going to go and make it, oh, stop it, cancel. I'm going to go right here, pick the right tool, and then use generative AI. And then let's get a little bigger of a brush and just say, hey, you know, it would be really cool if you would add some dunes over here, because I don't like all that mesquite. So I'm painting a little bit more than maybe you think I should be, but the reason that I'm painting that is because I want to have a little bit of area to blend, right? So now I can go ahead and say remove, and as long as you have internet connectivity, it will go ahead and use generative AI, and it will remove that, and it will, I know, and it gives you variations, right? So here's one, here's two, here's three. It's whichever one you want. Now that one is pretty small and not as exciting, so maybe we'll go with maybe the first one. Well, let's do that one. All right, now, some of you, I know, the hair just went up on the back of your neck. You're like, I can't believe she did that. I did it. Okay, so let's move on. Right, so what else do I want to do to this one? So some other adjustments that I want to make. Let's go in here and let's grab our brush, right? So here, I'll grab my brush, and what I want is I want this area all in here to be nice and glowy. I could try to do this with changing the temperature, but then I'm going to lose, if I warm up the whole image, I'm going to lose the blue on the mountains. So what if we do this? What if I click with kind of a small brush here, like right about there? I'm going to click once. And then what if we get a bigger brush, right, over here, and I hold down the Shift key, and we click there, and what it'll do is it'll interpolate between those two spots, so I go from a small to a large area. This is great also if you shoot a lighthouse. Very good. All right? You want to put that ray of light. So now we go to color, and I just say, yep, I'd like that to be a little bit more golden in there. That looks good. But it's also affecting this area of the mountain, or the dunes in this area too. So the way that masking works, I love in Lightroom, because we've added one component, but we can add as many components as we want. We can add components and we can subtract components. So here I might say, well, I just want to subtract, and I'll use my linear gradient. So I'll grab the linear gradient and I'll just click and drag right here, right? So now what I've done, let me just get that. You know, when you're trying to rotate something, you can usually move, you can use this little guy, this little pin right here, but sometimes if it's too close, you can also drag out from here. But that looks fine with me. So what have I got? I've got two components. I have this mask as my first component, because I've got my little cursor on top of it. So there's the first component. And then I subtract that component, and what I end up with is this. So then I think, oh, well, why don't I subtract this area too? So I'll go subtract, and I'll say linear gradient, and then we can click and drag up right here, and then I can just reposition that up a little higher. So now we have our brush that overlaps those dunes, but I don't want it to, so I subtract one linear gradient, I subtract another linear gradient, and that's the mask that we end up with. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay, cool. So just think about them as each being their own component, and the best thing about this is, as long as they're a manual mask, like the radial mask or the brush or something, and not an AI-generated mask, you can move each of these components independently of one another. So if I wanted to reposition this brush, you can see I can just drag it, and it will actually reposition that, but it leaves the other two in their spot. I wish Photoshop had that, but if only I knew someone. At Adobe. Okay. So then maybe one more. Let's add a second mask, right? So our first mask has three components. I'm going to add a second mask. This is going to be a linear gradient. I'm just going to drag down, and let's just make that a little bit more blue, like a little cooler. There we go. And then we can see that we just went very quickly from that to that. I know, but some of you might not like that dune, but that's okay. All right. It's not cheating. It's art. Okay. So now we have these two really cute foxes. Well, we have the little baby, and then we have mom, and we don't really want mom in the image. And let's see, let's go into 100% here. We are a little bit noisy, so let's go down. I'm going to go to detail, and we'll go ahead and add denoise. You know what, actually, because it takes like 30 seconds, and I don't have 30 seconds, I already did it. Ha, there it is, denoised. See, I save them all out as little snapshots, so I know what I've done, and I can go back through them. I know that's a little much for people, but wait till you see when I edit some stuff. Okay, so here it is denoised. We like that. And then I'm going to go in and remove things. So why am I removing things before I crop? Because I'm going to really crop into this, but if I don't remove that fox and I've cropped it, sometimes Lightroom's like, well, I don't know, you still got half a fox off the edge, and it'll try to make like a two-headed fox or a two-tailed fox or something. So I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can remove things beforehand. So let's go over here. I'll tap Q again to get my remove tool. I'm going to use generative fill. Let's get a little bit of the fox, the little baby fox, and then mom. You notice, see, I went a little bit into the back, but that's okay. And here's the cool thing. If you want to remove more than one thing, like maybe you don't like this dark area here, and maybe you don't like that area there, and you don't like this area here, when I hit remove, this time it's going to take a little bit longer because it's actually removing those four areas that are discontiguous, meaning that they don't touch. It's going to remove them independently of one another, so I'll get 3 variations for each one of the spots that it puts down. And what that enables is it enables it to create, when it returns the information, because it's not super high resolution, because it's all doing the stuff over the cloud and everything, it will go ahead and fill that with higher quality than if I'd done those all with one single stroke. So now you can see, like if I come over here, I've got this pin, so I could go through my different variations. There's 1, 2, and 3. I love the way it even puts in the rain. Or we could come over here to this pin and select it, and we could go in and make our changes there as well. Okay, so now that I've removed that, now I will go ahead and crop it. So tap the R key. Let's say, I don't know, maybe we need some space over here for text or something, so I'll crop it like that. Now, how about making some masks? Well, yeah, should I do the basic panel? Yeah, we'll go to the basic panel and do some global stuff. So what would I do? I'd bring up my whites, looking at my histogram. I might bring up my shadows a little bit. I might bring down my highlights just a wee bit, maybe a lot, maybe all the way. And then come here to my blacks and set that down. Again, if I wanted to add saturation, I could also use dehaze. So when I add dehaze, you notice, see all that saturation it adds? I wouldn't get that if I just set my black point with my blacks. So sometimes I do that as well. All right, now we want to select the fox. Oh, I didn't get rid of his little, wait, he's got a little piece of grass. And he's awful cute, don't you think? Look at, what are you doing? Where's mom? All right. Let's get rid of that. Oh, I think that's probably not quite the right spot, but that's okay. It's like I'm a little scared. Okay, so now I want to select them. I want to select them. So with my masking, I would try select subject first, right? It didn't get his tail. Bummer. So don't worry about it. Just try something else. I prefer select objects. I think it works really well. What I do is I change the mode from this paintbrush to this rectangle, and now I can drag over a marquee and I can kind of guide it and say, hey, this is the area that I want you to look for an object in. And sometimes I notice, like in this case, it's a much better selection. Sometimes select subject does a better job. So if one doesn't work, just try the other one. And honestly, I mean, if it gets you 90% of the way there, that's amazing, because you can add more components and it saves us so much time. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to, let's add some effects on this one. He probably needs a little bit of texture, and maybe I should zoom on in while we're doing that so we can see that, right? So there's our texture. Texture is adding edge contrast to the smallest edges in the image. It's different from clarity, so clarity also adds edge contrast, but it does it to a larger radius. So what do I mean? I mean that when you're doing texture and Lightroom finds an edge, it's going to add contrast. So it'll make one side lighter, the other side darker, but it only does it to a few little pixels on either side. When you do this with clarity, when Lightroom finds an edge, it's going to add the darkness and the brightness on either side to a wider range of pixels. So it's a very different look. Texture is more kind of like sharpening, right? Like this is, it's much broader, all right? It is still edge contrast. Oh, and of course we can go the opposite way if we wanted to make it softer. But in this case, I just want to add a little bit of texture. There we go. And if I wanted to, we could simply say, hey, you know what, that was a good mask. Let's go ahead and click on the little more icon, and I can say duplicate and invert the mask. Now everything else is selected, right? And then we could go in and do something like maybe change the color here. Oof, depressed. Ooh, different world. All right, let's just make it a little brighter. Okay, that's a little bit happier. And then one other thing, I'll do a radial gradient. So click the plus icon, we'll go to radial gradient. You know, if you hold down the command key and you just double click, it'll actually make a radial gradient that is the size of your canvas. That's kind of nice, or you can always drag it out. But it always affects the inside. So come over here and just click on invert. Now we've got the invert. Now we can go to maybe tone or something, and we could change the exposure. We could also go in. Why is it hidden? Let's get it, there we go. And we could make it smaller, and look, it's basically like a little spotlight that you could add anywhere in your image. So pretty cool. All right, so in just a few moments, we went from that to that, very different. Oh, it's a little dark up there, maybe that's me. Well, I could, you're fine, you get the idea. Okay, let's go through a few of these a little bit quicker now. So the first thing I would do, I've got my profile and my lens correction applied with my raw defaults. I go in and I do my global toning, set my black and white points, adjust my shadows and my highlights, maybe adjust the exposure if needed be. I can even add contrast there. Then I can add my vignette if I want to, so all my global adjustments. And then my small, my small distraction removal. Let's go to Q for a second. I'm just gonna click on this and unhide this. Just, I don't know if you can see that, like all the, I heard that. Yeah, so I'm a little insane, but you know what? It's just cleaner, right? So if we hide those again, and we just look, I mean, look at the difference. To me, it makes, it matters, right? Like all those little pieces, I don't want you looking at those little pieces in between. And then I would just go in and I would do my larger remove to generate this area in the foreground and then get rid of those footsteps that were back here as well. Okay, now, I'm sure you've never been to a place and had this happen where there's a gazillion people and I'm like, I just want the columns. So if we look at the bottom part of remove now, there is something called people. And if I enable that, it's going to go up and use, it's going to go up online and it's going to detect the people in your image. Now, it does make a rather large selection around them. For an image like this, I think it's just fine. It selected them all. Do you notice one thing it didn't select, though? It didn't select the leg. So that's kind of funny. Sometimes, I mean, at some point, you just have to kind of laugh and go, huh, well, that's awkward. Not sure. There's a very small person back there, right? But I like to show files like this that aren't like, they don't work like 100% the first time because, hey, you know, sometimes it takes a combination of both. So I can come up here and say, hey, look, here's my little guy right here, my healing brush. So let's just remove that. And I can do it with generative if you want to. It's whatever you prefer. And so I would just paint over that and say, yes, please, thank you. Could you please remove that leg as well? But hey, it got me 90% of the way there. It works for me. All right, what about an image like this if we use people removal? So you're going to think, oh, great, it's going to get rid of all the people. Here's the thing. It's called distraction removal. So if there's a person that's like standing there and it's a primary person, it's probably not going to select that person. So now when I hit remove, it's just going to remove all of the distracting people because it thought, well, I don't know if it thinks. OK, anyway, maybe it does. It's smarter than I am, I know that much. So it's just going to say, well, I think that person is probably should be there because you probably should have a subject in your image. And I'm like, no, don't like subjects in my image, but that's OK. But look at that. I mean, pretty darn good. There's before and there's after. So it's doing a great job. The other thing we can do is we can blur. Right? So here we've got this lovely polar bear, and I'll zoom in here. And if I want to add my blur, we can just come back to the basic, or the edit stack here, and scroll on down. And here is our lens blur, and we can go ahead and apply that. It might take a second to apply it. It's set to auto-select a subject, so it's going to try to find the subject in your image, and then it will add the blur to it. So there it is. It's adding it. Now, some of you probably noticed, look at, it does shorten the hair. OK. I could have used a smaller aperture, right? Or is it a bigger one? It's always the inverse. I could have gone to 2.8 or something, and then I would have gotten more depth of field. But if you didn't have your camera set right, this can be quite helpful. The other thing you can do is you can then open this file in Photoshop, select that area of the hair, and then tell it to regenerate an area, and it might generate a little bit more maybe furrier fur. But I think that's a little bit too much of a blur amount, so I'll just take that off. And we can change the focus too, right? So if I do zoom out, this is the subject icon. This is our little focus. So I could say, oh no, I don't know why, but I want the background in focus. So anywhere you click, it'll go ahead and focus there. So if I want to focus on the foreground, it'll reanalyze it, and then the foreground will be in focus. Or you can move this little guy right here and tell it exactly where you want it in focus. Because see, it's kind of going, the focus range here is going from near to far. And so you can move that slider. You can change the size of the slider, anything you want. There's also focus and blur refinement, so if it doesn't quite get it right. So for example, in this image, it's got a shallow depth of field, and when I apply lens blur, it just doesn't get it. So it's like, I'm not really sure what should be blurred. So here, the blur amount is quite a bit, but look at, it's blurring the frog. That's not what I want. So let's visualize the depth here. So when you visualize the depth, the stuff that's darker matches up with the little gradient here in the focus range. So the darker areas are supposed to be far. Well, actually, so it's not, right? So what can we do? Well, it's kind of easy, because we can just slide this all the way over and make it super small, OK? And then we can go in with our brush refinement, all right? So what does this look like right now? Let's just look. OK, so it's looking pretty blurry, all right? But I want it to be completely blurry. I want to blur it as much as possible. So I'm going to go to Blur, and I'm going to change the amount to 200%. I'm going to get a really big brush here, and I'm just going to paint over the whole thing. What? I know. Because I want like a little tilt shift look here. So if you paint over the whole thing, great. I'm going to commit to that by now clicking on Focus, and I'm going to say, hey, let's not bring the focus up to 100%. Let's go maybe 50 right now. Let's turn off this visualized depth so we can see it's really, really blurry. Get a smaller brush, and now I'll just start painting, and wherever I paint, it's going to paint in the amount of focus for me. So now I can use the slider and say, no, I really want that a little bit more in focus or more in focus. And then I can commit to that and say, hey, that's great, but maybe this area should also be a little bit more in focus. So now, because I clicked that little plus icon, sorry if you didn't see that, there was a plus icon here. So now I'm starting a new paint stroke. So now I can paint up here and say, oh, no, I don't want that 100% focus. I want it a little bit less, and maybe over here too, right? So just painting in and out the blur and the focus in your image. So it's quite fun. So I would recommend that you play around with the brush refinement. OK, removing, this one's crazy. Here's what it starts with, right? So here's denoise, because it was quite noisy. That's what it's starting with. There's denoise. Then remove reflections. How did I do that? So when you come over here and you pick up your remove tool and you come down to reflections, we can go for any quality. So we can do preview, standard, or best. I'm going to do best, and I'm going to hit apply. So you could probably do, maybe for like a smaller post like social media, you could probably do a lesser quality, but I print a lot, so I'm going to do the best quality here. It just takes a little bit longer. All right, and then I would go in and say, all right, well, let's remove like the lettuce and everything. So I'd grab this, use my generative AI, get a little bigger right here, and I mean, it's a nice piece of lettuce, I have to admit, but I don't really want it in my image. So then I would go ahead and remove that. So we can remove that. And then I'm just going to walk you through the rest of the little steps here. So, oh, not that one. How about, oh, that's interesting. I don't know. I must have not made the selection right. See, did you notice I didn't blame Lightroom? Me. Blame Lightroom, you don't be sincere, you know what happens. Okay, so I'll go to the step that I already did because it's faster, right? So I would remove that, remove the reflection, I'd go to crop, I would use the remove tool, then I would do any global edits, and then we could do a little vignette there. We could do a little lens blur if we wanted to. Then we could darken down our highlights and just brighten the eyes a little bit. So really, you know, maybe, 10 steps, but I think it makes a world of difference in the image. Okay, let's move on. Got to keep going. We'll skip that one because I want to make sure that we get to landscape, all the new landscape masking. So when you go over here to your masking, there is a new mode called landscape. If you select that, there are, I believe, 7 different masks it can make. I won't remember them all right now. Oh, that's okay, because I actually have, so it's going to detect your image. It's going to look at your image and detect, like, if there's a building in it and if there's vegetation, if there's mountains, if there's sky, if there's water, natural ground, and mountains. Did I already say that? I don't remember what the last one was. But if you want to, you can also just come over here. Like if you had 30 images, you can download from my blog a preset that will just add every single one of the masks that are available in it. So if your image doesn't have like a building in it or something, it would just leave that mask blank. But at least then you don't have to come in here and click landscape and then say, no, I want you to make a mountain and a vegetation and a water mask and create the 3 separate masks. So here, I'll just create them. It's interesting that it thinks that's a mountain, but I'm going to do it anyway. So let's create the mask. Here's our water mask. It has selected the water, so I might want to go in here and change the color. We can just make this a little bit more blue. Come up here to vegetation. Oh, what's that? Did you notice that? See that? Little mistake right there, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to subtract, grab my brush, get a small brush, and just paint that out. Ha, done. All right, then we've got vegetation. Let's make it look like fall, right? Instead of spring, we can just move our temperature and our tint slider over, maybe like to there. Ooh, that's quite vibrant. Maybe, my eyes are bleeding. Okay, I'll turn that down a little bit. All right, and then the mountains, I don't know, what should we do in there? Let's go into tone, and let's decrease our highlights a little, and let's pull up our contrast and maybe pull up our shadows a little bit. Okay, so just with those 3 masks, pretty quickly, we can really make either, you know, natural adjustments or maybe go overboard a little. Depends on what you like. All right, never disparage another person's art. How about this image right here? So here, I've done all these things. I put my profile, I removed some things, I transformed it to kind of straighten the building, and now I've made my global adjustments. So again, I'll go back to my mask, and we can come back to landscape. And let's see what it comes up with this time. It should detect the building. So it doesn't, it detects architecture. It won't like go in and detect like, that's a squeaky door, or that's a window, or something like that. I'm so like, okay, right here, 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 and here. You can combine these as well. So what's vegetation? Vegetation is like the foreground and the trees. Natural ground is the foreground. So I don't really need the natural ground for this. Usually what that'll do is like, it'll if you had like a bike path, the natural ground would be the bike path. Oh, that was the other category, is unnatural ground, I think. But it's man-made ground, like cement and stuff, so it would select a road. Okay, so 3 masks, sure, let's create those masks. So let's take this down in saturation. Ooh, let's make it a little moody. Let's take down the tone a little bit right there. That'll darken it down. What about this architecture? Yeah, way too hot. So let's bring down our highlights there. Let's bring down our exposure a wee bit, and maybe even our whites. That door totally belongs on this, this architecture. Okay, and then the sky, it's done a sky mask, so we'll bring that down maybe a little bit. Let's go to our effects, and let's go for dehaze. Let's try that. Okay, making it too saturated, though, for me personally, I'm very, someone told me my color palette is somewhere between doom and gloom. So we'll take down that saturation as well. And then we might just want to go in and make some of our own masks, right? So those were all AI generated masks, but I can come in here and say, let's go to linear gradient and let's drag this up a little bit and let's just darken that down, right? So our eye doesn't go off the bottom of the page, and then we can do the same thing. We'll add one here. I could probably put these both together, but I don't know, I might want to change the values of how much I darken the top and the bottom separate from one another. So let's just do that. Let's bring that down, make it a little bit bigger, and then let's also get rid of some color, because one thing that dehaze does, because if you think about it, if it really is correcting atmospheric perspective, it will add in some saturation. So I'm just gonna come in here and desaturate that. See that yellow that's in the clouds? It gets rid of that. Okay, cool. I'm gonna do one more, then we're gonna get to, oh my gosh, to Photoshop. Yes, I promise. But I want to show this because I think it's pretty cool. So if I go to the sky mask, right, we can get to sky mask right here, pretty easy, and we desaturate this just a little bit. Now, let's say I want to dodge this area here, meaning that I want to make this area lighter. So again, think about the components. I'm going to go in, and I'm actually going to start with a linear gradient. I don't want to go in and try to paint along that edge. Instead, I'm going to go with linear gradient, and I'm going to drag it down, and I'm going to lighten that up. But what else is it lightening? The sky. I don't want the sky to be lightened, right? So what do? Subtract it. Go to subtract and go to the sky. Sky, right there. And now what I've got is my linear gradient, but it's subtracting the sky, so this is only affecting that area, right? So that's the only area that's being affected. So I can just lighten that up. And it's getting a little bit, I think, too saturated for me. So let's come here and we can either take that towards blue like that, or we could just desaturate it a little bit, whatever you want. Okay, but the other thing I want to show you is this bush. Like, how would I just select that bush? There are other green things in the image area. So here's kind of a cool way you can do it. We'll start with a new mask, and we'll just grab a brush, and I'm just going to paint in this area, right? So I've got the green there, but I'm avoiding the other two bushes, okay? But it's really sloppy, right? If I make an adjustment now, you're going to see that adjustment on the ground, not just on the bush, right? So let's say we want to make it brighter green like this. That's fine. Let's zoom in. So I've got this big area that's painted, this big mask. But I want to say, within that mask, only affect the greens. So I can't add to it, and I can't subtract from it. What I need is the intersection of these two masks. So you can either use the little more icon here and say intersect mask with, and then pick something. Or if you hold down the Option or the Alt key, this will change to intersect. So now when I say intersect, I say, well, what do I want to do? Well, let's try color range, because this is all the same color. So I'm going to click and drag in order to select this area of green. And it's going to say, oh, OK. So now, maybe I shouldn't have zoomed in, but you can't. Can you see, like, this area is no longer being affected. It's only the greens, right? So we have the brush, but we intersect with the greens. Now, it does pick the greens from the entire image, but because I'm asking for the intersection, it's not going to affect any of the greens that are outside my initial brush stroke. So now when I make my adjustments, we're only adjusting the greens and not, like if you look at the reds back here, we're not affecting the ground, only the bush. And you can go in and you know, you can refine that. There's a little refine slider right here. You could pick a different color. You can shift click and add up to 5 colors, but color range is really quite cool. Okay, whew. Go back to grid. Landscape, Photoshop. Oh, so many things we could do. I don't know, which one do you guys want to do? This one. Let's do the frog, because he's so darn cute. Let's open that in Photoshop. So here, I want to remove a really large area. And actually, I will show you this too. Right now, if you're removing small areas in Lightroom, I think that's absolutely fine. I'm going to go to 100% though here and scoot this over. And you guys know that you can lock the zoom position. So when you move from one image to the next, it will always zoom to the same spot. So with the zoom with the zoom locked position enabled. This was my original image. And then when I use the remove tool in Lightroom, it is using a previous learning model than Photoshop's using a more recent one. So this is what you would get with Lightroom, but this is what you get with Photoshop. Look at the difference, right? So that's pretty impressive. So Lightroom's got to get this new learning model, but it's not just like it's not like plugging in a plug. So they're working on that. But in the meantime, if I have a large area that I want to make a change to, I'm going to do it in Photoshop. So here, for example, if I want to, what? Did you see what I did there? I read that. Okay, I'm going to get my lasso tool. All right, now it's going to give me my selection brush, but I'm going to get my little lasso tool, and I'm going to go loop-de-doo, right around here. Let's get rid of all that. Dun, dun, dun. And then we've got our little contextual taskbar, which usually jumps around, but I have it pinned. But I will unpin that, and I'll do generative fill, and I will not add a prompt, and I'll just hit generate. And then we will use this newer learning model in Photoshop, and it will create 3 variations. And we can choose from those variations. We can continue to add more variations if we want to. But the key here is when you're using generative fill in Photoshop, if you have an image that's like really grainy, you're going to really want to zoom into 100% and make sure that you match the grain. So there's number 1. There's number 2. OK, I like number 3. You probably also want to delete the ones that you don't use. It'll just make your file size smaller. Now, before I make my next generative fill, I'm going to go with the object selection tool, and I'm going to select the frog, and I'm going to jump it to its own layer. Never gets old. Command-J, jump, frog, go. OK, so now the frog is on its own layer. Thanks. Sometimes the jokes are just for me. That's OK. All right, so now the frog is now protected, right? So now if I get my lasso tool, and I don't want that one. I want the old one. See, because remember, when we're doing like the generative fill, we want to make sure that we give it a little bit of space around whatever it is that we are trying to fill. So now let's generative fill that, let's generate it, and it'll go ahead and do this one. Generative fill actually only works with the layers below it. So it's now generating on top of the frog. We'll have to see what that does. Shouldn't make a difference in this case. Oh, yeah. Ow, ow. See, that's what would have happened if I moved the frog, right? So let's get rid of that. Oh, look at that. Oh, I've never seen that. Now we've got little hairy spines there. OK, so like I know, the poor frog. Like I was saying, you can always generate again. Terrific. We'll just try that one more time. Maybe it did make a difference that it was looking at that frog. Because see, I moved it down underneath, because whatever layer is targeted when you run generative fill, it's going to affect only those layers underneath it. OK, so we still, oh, that's a long arm. All right, OK, that one's looking good, but I like this one better. OK, that one's like 90% of the way there, so that's fine. Let's zoom into 100%, because look, I could just add another layer there, right? Like blank layer, there's layer 2, get my clone stamp tool, terrific. Hold down the Option key, start here, line that up, and look, I can stamp, and you can stamp all over here, because the frog's on its own layer, right? So now I'm not distorting the frog, because the frog's safe on this layer right here. Come here, la 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 la. La, la, la. Anyway, we can keep doing that, but look can you see the difference? Yeah, see when I zoom in, see the grain? Grain, no grain, grain, no grain. OK, so what do? I'm going to go to this generative fill layer, and I'm going to go up here to filter, and I'm going to go to camera raw as a filter. I'm at 200% there, so I want to make sure that I zoom into 200% here so that I'm comparing apples and oranges, or frogs and grain, whatever. And so this is the ungrainy part. So I'm just going to start adding in grain. So the grain is the amount of contrast that's being added. The size is how small or big the grain is. So it's pretty small. And then the roughness is more like, goes from like film to really rough, more like reticulation, right? So I'm going to do right about there. And we can click OK. And because this is a generative fill layer, it acts like it's already a smart object. So it's not applying it directly. It's adding it as a smart filter, which is also cool, because now let's make layer 2, which was this little retouching layer, right? Let's convert it to a smart object. Why? So that I can just Option drag that filter. So now I have the same grain there. And then I need some other grain. Yep, right down here. So we'll just scroll down and then Option and drag that there. And then we get the grain right there too. So just be careful when you have, like you don't want to have to do this to all of your images, but with some images that have a lot of grain, you'll probably need to go in there and add back in some grain for now. But don't forget, like this is the worst it's ever going to get. Like it's only going to get better from here. All right, so how about, these are just some other examples. I'm just pretty impressed with what it can do. You know, like it's subtle, but I mean, that's the edge of the boat. So the iceberg is going to break in a second, and I wasn't fast enough. I didn't get the shot, but I really liked it. So I just moved it up, and then I actually used this portion of it. I copied this to its own layer and rotated it and put it down here so it had some idea of what to generate. So you can help it, right? You could use a clone stamp tool and say, like, I want grass over here, and fill it with grass, and then go and say generate it, and then it would generate like all the nice edges, especially if you're compositing like grass with a tree or something like that. Okay, wires, we can remove wires. I have 8 more minutes. So wires, where is that? Command E, that'll take us to Photoshop. I know, why would you take this picture? I don't know, to show the demo that I can now come up here and say, with my remove tool, which is right here, there's find distractions, so wires and cables. That is kind of funny because it is just wires and cables. It's not poles. Which is probably good because it probably wouldn't know like what a light pole is versus a flag pole versus, you know, something like that. So yeah, so you can then just use the remove tool and come in here, click once, hold down the shift key, right, click again, tap enter return, and that will go ahead and remove that. Now, I have it set to auto, so it may or may not be using generative AI. So this tool actually has some intelligence built into it, and like if it's a really small area, it'll probably just use either the healing technology, we call it patch match, but it might also use content-aware fill, or it might use generative AI. It determines whatever technology it wants to use, but you can turn that off if you don't want it to use generative AI. You can just turn that off right there. Okay, so that's wire removal. There's also, that's just another wire. Okay, let's open this one, because this image is interesting because what I wanted to do, I wanted to crop this to a square, right? So the problem is, of course, we don't have that much data, right? And I want to put a sky in there. So let's do that. Let's scoot that up. Let's zoom out so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I put that down at the bottom, and I'm not going to use generative expand or anything. I'll just say fill that with the background. So I tap return or enter. It fills with a background color, which in this case is black. I go and grab the marquee tool, because here's the thing. If I try to do sky replace right now, it'll only replace the sky, and then I'll have a big black area at the top because it doesn't know that sky. So this is what I mean by sometimes you just have to think like, help Photoshop help you, right? So I'm just going to do Command T and hold down my Shift key to unlock the constraint and just bring that up there. So now I have a whole bunch of sky. Do I care that these are stretched pixels? No, I'm going to replace them, right? So this is the sky I'm going to use, this next image, but you have to export it as a JPEG. So when you want to add your own skies, export them as a JPEG, and then in Photoshop, when you go to the Edit menu and you go to Sky Replacement, right here, you can load your skies. So you use this little teeny tiny caret. Oops, don't scoot that over. This little guy right here, and go to the gear and then say get more skies, and then you can import your images. So I've already imported my image. It's down here. There's my sky. And I can go ahead and apply that now. I'm not sure exactly how oh, there we go. I scrolled that over. Okay. So then you can change the edge. You can change you can fade the edges if you want to, making them sharper or crisper. And if you tell it to do new layers, it will automatically build a layer group, and then you can go ahead and adjust the sky in there. I'm not going to go through every single detail there, but here is my layer group, right? So here it is right here, and there is my sky replacement. The important thing is that we had to extend that sky before we replaced it. Do I have 1 more minute? 2 more minutes? 20 more minutes? 500 more minutes? No, I don't. That's okay. You know what? This is on. Look, it's so easy. I'm just going to open up the end file. I just want to show you the layers here before we wrap up, because I don't want to stay too long on the stage because the next presenter is coming up. So you can see just how easy this is. It's only the 3 layers, right? What do I have? I have layer 1, this great like iceberg that looks like a crocodile. Then I have my sky, right? So there's my sky. And then I put a mask, right? Just a linear gradient mask in there to blend them. And here's a copy of that iceberg. And all I did was I was on the iceberg layer, and I just went to my object select, and probably, or maybe I even just did select subject, I'm not really sure, but if you just drag it there, see, it made the selection for me. So I just jumped that to its own layer, just like we did the frog, put the little sky in between, and then I didn't have to retouch all of that. So I am sorry that I am out of time. I hope you guys learned something here. There's more information. Thank you.